The Gizmondo sold fewer than 25,000 units, yet somehow became tangled in organized crime allegations, missing money, and a Ferrari Enzo crash on a California highway. On paper, it was a handheld game console with global positioning system features and big ambitions. In reality, the machine was quickly overshadowed by the people behind it, the cash flowing through it, and one impossible question: was this ever really about making a game system? In 2005, handheld gaming was suddenly the hottest battlefield in the industry. Nintendo had the DS, with 2 screens, a touchscreen, and the kind of first-party games nobody else could match. Sony had the PlayStation Portable, a sleek black machine that promised console-style graphics, movies, music, and the power of the PlayStation brand in your hands. Then came the Gizmondo, trying to sound bigger than both of them. It promised a handheld with global positioning system navigation, text messaging, a built-in camera, multimedia playback, and even location-based gaming. The idea was that your real-world position could affect what happened inside the game. Walk through a city, and the device could theoretically know where you were and change the experience around you. That sounds normal now, because smartphones made location tracking, cameras, messaging, maps, and games feel like parts of the same object. In 2005, it sounded like science fiction squeezed into a chunky handheld. The company behind it, Tiger Telematics, promoted the Gizmondo like it was not competing with the DS or the PlayStation Portable at all. It was presented as the next step beyond them, a pocket entertainment device, a communications tool, and a gaming platform in one. The dream was bold. The problem was that turning a futuristic checklist into a real consumer product takes money, discipline, and trust. And the deeper people looked at where the Gizmondo's money came from, the stranger the story became. Tiger Telematics did not introduce the Gizmondo like a small company testing a risky product. It introduced it like a cultural event. In March 2005, the Gizmondo launched in the United Kingdom with a level of spectacle that made the device look far more established than it really was. The company staged expensive parties, brought in celebrity appearances, leaned into flashy streetwear-style branding, and tried to surround the handheld with the feeling of a premium lifestyle product. This was not just a games machine on a shelf. It was being sold as something fashionable, exclusive, and connected to fame. The marketing push stretched beyond ordinary advertising. Gizmondo Europe opened high-profile retail spaces, sponsored events, and chased publicity wherever it could. The company wanted the public, investors, and the games industry to see momentum, even before the market had proven there was any real appetite for the device. The rollout itself was much smaller than the image suggested. After the United Kingdom launch, the Gizmondo appeared only in limited markets, including Sweden and the United States. It was not a global takeover. It was a patchy release backed by spending that looked completely out of proportion to the number of units actually reaching customers. And on the software side, the problem was obvious. A new handheld lives or dies on its games. But Gizmondo did not have a strong library. It had a few notable titles, some ambitious concepts, and promises of more to come, but nothing close to the kind of lineup needed to challenge Nintendo or Sony. So the company kept buying attention. Parties, celebrities, sponsorships, luxury branding, and public spectacle created the illusion of scale. But behind that illusion was a handheld with tiny sales, weak demand, and no clear path to mainstream success. Which raises the question that makes the Gizmondo story so unbelievable. How could a company selling so little burn through money so fast? The answer was supposed to be the business model. Gizmondo was not just selling hardware, it was also trying to sell access to the people carrying that hardware around. The company introduced something called Smart Ads. The idea was simple. Customers could buy the Gizmondo at a lower price if they agreed to receive advertisements on the device. Instead of paying full price up front, users would accept sponsored messages delivered through the handheld, turning the machine into a portable ad screen. On paper, that sounded clever. Mobile advertising was expected to become huge, and the Gizmondo had location features that made targeted promotions seem possible. A device in your pocket could, in theory, show offers based on where you were. To investors, that made the handheld look like more than a games console. It looked like a technology platform. For actual customers in 2005, it was a much harder pitch. Handheld gaming was already expensive, and players were comparing the Gizmondo against Nintendo's dual-screen handheld and Sony's PlayStation Portable. Those systems had stronger brands, clearer identities, and much better software support. Gizmondo was asking people to take a risk on an unknown device, then accept ads as part of the deal. The pricing made the confusion worse. The ad-supported version was cheaper, but the product was still presented like a premium gadget. That created a strange message. This was supposed to be an exclusive luxury handheld, but one of its main selling points was that you could get it discounted if you let companies advertise to you. And the ad model needed scale to work. Advertisers had to believe enough people would carry the Gizmondo. Retailers had to believe enough people would buy it. Developers had to believe enough people would play it. None of those groups had strong evidence, so the business model depended on a future audience that never arrived. Smart ads did not fix weak software, limited distribution, or unclear positioning. It only added another layer of uncertainty, and even that was just the visible problem. Behind the scenes, the company's issues were about to get much darker. The darker story centered on the people running the company, especially Stefan Eriksson, one of Gizmondo's most visible executives. Eriksson was not a typical games industry figure. Before Gizmondo, he had a criminal record in Sweden, including convictions tied to fraud and counterfeiting. Reports also connected him and others around the company to Sweden's so-called Uppsala Mafia, a criminal group linked in media coverage to financial crimes and violence. Some of those connections were alleged or reported rather than proven in court, but the effect was immediate. The company was no longer just being judged by its product, it was being judged by the backgrounds of the men selling it. That mattered because Gizmondo needed trust more than almost anything else. It was asking investors for money, publishers for support, retailers for shelf space, and customers to believe in a new handheld from a company with no track record. Once questions about organized crime entered the story, every business decision looked different. The spending became harder to explain. Executives were associated with luxury cars, expensive offices, and an image that seemed wildly out of step with the console's weak sales. Instead of looking like a struggling startup trying to break into gaming, Gizmondo began to look like a company where the money trail was more interesting than the product roadmap. Leadership also became a problem. If the people at the top were under scrutiny, then promises about future games, advertising deals, and international expansion carried less weight. The handheld still had technical problems and a tiny library, but those issues were now competing with a much bigger question. Was Gizmondo a serious console business, or was the console just a front for something else? That question damaged the brand faster than any bad review could. The machine was already failing in stores, but the scandal around its executives made failure feel inevitable. Then the story left the business pages completely, because one spectacular crash was about to turn Gizmondo into international tabloid material. In February 2006, a red Ferrari Enzo was found wrecked on the Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu, California. It was not just damaged, the car had been torn apart, with the front section separated from the passenger compartment after an impact at extreme speed. The Enzo was one of Ferrari's rarest supercars, worth around $1 million, and it was registered through a British financial company. Behind the wheel, or at least at the scene, was Stefan Eriksson, the former Gizmondo executive whose company had already burned through huge amounts of money. Eriksson survived with only minor injuries, then gave police a story that made the crash even stranger. He claimed he had not been driving. According to him, the driver was a mysterious German man named Dietrich, who had run away into the hills after the wreck. Investigators did not buy it. There was no sign of Dietrich, and the crash quickly became more than a traffic case. Police began looking at how Eriksson had obtained the car, why it was in the United States, and whether it had been properly paid for. That led them into a wider investigation involving leased supercars, allegations of embezzlement, grand theft auto, and the finances surrounding Gizmondo's parent company, Tiger Telematics. The Ferrari was not an isolated symbol of excess anymore. It became physical evidence. The handheld had already failed in the market, but the Enzo crash gave the collapse a single, unforgettable image. $1 million supercar split in half, tied to the executives of a company that was also coming apart. By the time the Ferrari crash made international headlines, Gizmondo was already collapsing as a business. The handheld had launched with big promises, but the sales never came close to matching the spending. Public estimates put total units sold at fewer than 25,000, an almost microscopic number for a company trying to compete in the same market as Nintendo and Sony. In February 2006, Gizmondo Europe entered liquidation. That was the formal end of the company's main operating arm, and it confirmed what the market had already decided. The device was not building an audience, retailers were not moving stock, and the company behind it could not keep burning cash forever. The strange part is that the hardware was not completely pointless. It had ideas that were ahead of the curve for a handheld. Satellite navigation, wireless messaging, multimedia features, and even location-based gaming concepts. On paper, Gizmondo understood that portable devices were going to become more than game machines. But the execution around those ideas was a disaster. The software library was thin, the marketing was confused, the price was hard to justify, and the company structure was surrounded by questions. Instead of a focused hardware launch, Gizmondo became a fog of celebrity parties, luxury spending, stock market hype, and executives with histories that were much more interesting to investigators than to players. That is why the Gizmondo does not sit in gaming history like a normal failed console. It is not remembered the way people remember a machine that simply launched too late, cost too much, or lacked enough games. Its legacy became something stranger, a gaming product attached to allegations of fraud, criminal pasts, financial chaos, and one of the most infamous supercar crashes of the 2000s. In the end, the console was almost the least important object in its own story. The Gizmondo was the thing being sold, but it now feels more like a prop in a much larger scandal. So how did this even happen? A forgotten handheld became legendary because everything around it was more unbelievable than the device itself. Was Gizmondo a doomed tech gamble, a reckless vanity project, or something darker hiding behind a console launch? Write your take in the comments, because this story still feels impossible even after laying out the facts. Thank you for watching, and if you want more stories like this, gaming history has plenty of disasters buried behind hardware most people forgot existed.